So first thing I'm gonna go over is gain structure. And you can see right here, I have a gain reader, and also on the side, it's a different version of that. Typically, what you're gonna want in a microphone or any input, you wanna make sure you're averaging. So right now, it looks like I'm averaging close to like -30. I want roughly -18. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bump up the gain until I'm averaging what I need to, right? So it's getting better, but I still need more. And then once I'm kind of averaging what I need to, the fader is a lot lower. And you see how it's already getting into the yellow? That's exactly where I want to be. On this part, it's going to show in green, which means you're getting good gain. Anything below that is not enough. Anything above that is okay, but you also have to make sure you don't hit over, because if you hit over, this is what it's going to sound like. It's going to start clipping really bad, and you're going to hit that red. So
Yeah. But listen, all the settings are like this, which is crazy. I didn't know I had to be like at 24. That's a big difference.
yeah, it should be, you should be seeing the yellow on the side for the digital gain. You should see that. And this section should be green, getting into the top yellow. So when you're not getting enough, it's going to be really hard to mix in general.
Okay, so um, this isn't like a volume thing. Once you set your gain to where it needs to be, then you adjust your volume wherever you need, right? The fader.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I I was reading something online or I was looking at videos and I remember seeing that like people adjust their gain by having their fader at 0
Hmm.
and then um, and then just turning up the gain to where it sounds clean.
No, that's wrong.
Yeah, that's not correct. I see that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, that's a big no-no. So like right now, if you look at my microphone, I'm averaging good gains, but my fader is all the way down at -20. If you can switch the pan or the view. So my microphone is here. I'm like really low. So what this means, if my mains are at 0, which is what I want to be able to have my fader at 0 too, or close to 0. So that means the amps on the speakers need to be turned down, so that way you can run the board and actually use the preamps the way they're meant to be used. And a preamp is essentially just the stage box, what the actual like. It's hard to explain, but essentially, if you're using a preamp less than it should be used, you're not going to get the full like signal, full audio range of what it can do. So think of like a guitar having an EQ that's very compressed and just mid-range only. That's essentially what you're doing with the preamp if you're not getting enough signal. So basically, once you get enough signal and you're looking at the screen and it's getting right around that -18, a little over 20, -20, then the next thing I do is EQs. So from here, what I'm looking at is the EQ. Essentially, you can have a flat EQ, right? This is essentially a flat EQ. And in the room, it's not going to sound good because there's frequencies that my voice should not have in the microphone. And the room might just be resonating certain frequencies that just don't sound good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from a flat EQ, right? First thing I always include is a high-pass filter. I'll drag it over to about 120, maybe a little more, close to 200, until I get rid of that like boomy sound. And then for a voice, I'm going to go off the cheat sheet that I showed you guys earlier. So I cut out that low-end rumble that the cheat sheet shows. Then there's around a 200 boom, but because my high-pass filter is right around 200, I can deal with it because it's not too bad. Then around 800 to 1,000, there's like that nasally sound, right? So that's going to be this low mid. If I cut a little bit from here, you'll hear it gets a lot more clear, right? And then from there, if I need anything else, you'll see like at 3K, we have a little bit of presence. So if I bump that up right around here, you'll hear my voice gets a little bit more like present in the mix, a little more clear. If I bump up anywhere from 400 to 800, you'll start hearing sibilance. So that's like right around here where you hear that tss, tss, right? And typically for podiums, you don't want to hear that. You want it to sound as natural as possible and no like sibilance as much as possible. And then the highs, which are right here, you can, this is where you get the airy sound of a voice, right? So it still sounds really full, but there's now like a little bit of depth and airiness to my voice now. And you will hear like the high-end frequencies in my voice a little more. But typically, this is only done if you really need it. Most churches have a decent amount of like high-end, so I typically just focus on cleaning up the voice on the low end, just making sure it's not too boomy and that it cuts through decently in the mix. So most of the time, my EQ for vocals is very much like this. If I need to, I'll just shrink it down a little bit. I'll focus on whatever frequency I don't like, and then that'll be my EQ for a vocal. If I notice someone has a really like nasally voice, I'll also, or a voice that cuts through really hard, I'll cut around like 500 and just like make a sharper cut if their voice is like a little piercing. Just because right around that 5K is where like piercing voices cut through really hard, and you want to focus on making sure it doesn't sound too harsh. So that's typically more for female vocalists, but male vocalists sometimes, if they're like a tenor or higher vocal range, they'll cut through on that side a little bit too. So once I get the EQ kind of set, the next thing I'm hopping over to is if I need a gate, I can use a gate, but typically I'm not gonna really use a gate unless it's like a drum set. So I'm gonna go over to compressor. And so just like I showed in the presentation, you have the in volume, the out volume on the right side, right? And then we have the threshold, the ratio, the attack, the release, and then the out gain. And then we can change also the type of knee. So I typically like a soft knee, which rounds it out. And the threshold, what I can do is it's gonna choose where it starts to cut in, right? So I'll turn it on, and this is what it's gonna look like if I drop the threshold. And first we'll do the ratio. You can see it changes how much it lets it through. So a 1-to-1 ratio means for every 1 decibel it goes up. In volume real time, it's gonna go 1 decibel up in volume in-house too. But if I have a 8-to-1 ratio, that's gonna look like every 8 decibels it goes up in real volume. It's only letting 1 decibel of volume go through into house. So here's what it sounds like if I cut down. And like I mentioned before, attack I always drag to 0, just so that way it kicks in immediately. The release, I'll give it a tiny bit of release, but not a ton, just because I don't want it hanging and compressing after my voice is done talking. So now I'm gonna mess with the threshold, and I'm gonna cut it pretty hard so you can hear what it does. So at this point, I'm compressing really hard, and you can see the harder I compress it, the more it lights up how much it's compressing, right? And if you watch, the lower it gets, the more I compress it. This level goes high, but then the out needs extra because I cut so much. So that's where this out gain comes in really handy. And you bump up the out gain to get more signal and kind of average the same. So that's essentially how a compressor works. Typically, I don't run super hot compressors on vocals.
have a question.
What's up?
Compressor makes quieter things louder too, though, right?
Yeah, so that's the out gain is what makes the quieter parts louder.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And the threshold, the actual cutting of with the threshold and the ratio is what brings the the loud parts quieter. And so you'll see the gain reduction in orange. That's how much it's cutting. And then you'll see the out overall is going to be dropped lower, so it matches the quieter parts of my voice. And that's why I bump up the out gain to bring up the quieter parts and kind of bring down the dynamic range of my vocal. But typically for my vocals, depending on where I'm running, I'll check to see what it averages on the in, and I want the actual threshold set to compress it right where it's like not a ton over my threshold, but it needs to be over so it's actually doing something. And I'll bring my ratio typically to 3-1. If I need more and the vocalist is like really loud in some parts and really quiet in other, then I'll play with with the ratio and cut it even harder. But for the most part, a 3-1 or 3.5-1 is probably the best area to be at. So that's my process for vocals, and then also you have panning, which you can see right here. If I was on where the piano is, I would pan it over a little bit to the left side, so that way you can hear my voice primarily coming from the left side. If I was on the right side of the stage, I'd pan a little over to the right side. Obviously not this drastic, but doing this creates a little bit more space in the mix, so that way when you're mixing, you actually have a lot more room for all the vocals and stuff. So panning does help a lot with creating that space overall. And then in this screen, obviously you can see my gain, my EQ, if I'm running a gate, if I have a compressor on, and then that function I told you, recall safe, if this is on, that means no matter what scene I go to, it's gonna keep this setting, right? So if let's say you're doing a service with multiple points and you're saving each scene for each point, and you want the podium mic, the pastor mic, whatever the case is, to stay the same and always be on, not be affected by the scene change, I'm gonna hit recall safe, and it's gonna basically allow me to switch scenes without it even touching my channel.
But EQ and compressor, that all changes depending on the vocalist, though, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So this is something you can't really use the.
You can get a basic down. Typically, this basic, like compressor, for example, this is a very good basic compressor, right? Roughly at -30, because your gain structure needs to be right around 24, 20, -18, right around that area. And once you kind of get it to that point, then you know your threshold is always going to be active or activating the gate. As long as it's doing its job and you see it actually cutting, then typically you don't need it to cut like a ton. It's just to kind of bring down the overall peaks and then bump up the overall quiet parts. So that way you're matching up and lining up the averages.
I was gonna ask about that mute safe. What is that?
So for some boards, you have functions that let you choose. Like on this board, you can set up buttons as mute groups, and essentially you hit a button and it will mute all the channels that you want it to mute. I typically don't use mute groups just because I can do that with the DCAs or with the buses. If I mute the bus, it's gonna mute the channels too. So the mute safe essentially is just, if it's in a mute group and you hit mute safe, it won't actually mute it with the rest of the group. That's essentially all it does. So right now you guys don't have any buses set up or DCAs. And I gotta refresh myself on how to do that on this board specifically. But essentially what it would look like is it would just be another channel So think of like the vocal channel. If you can switch to the other view. Like this view right here, you would see all the channels separately, and then I would have a second page just of buses. Like right here, specifically, I would have a bus for vocals, a bus for drums, a bus for instruments, whatever the case is. And in that bus, all I get to do is, depending on the type of board you're using, some boards will let you EQ a bus as well. But most buses will just be set to 0, and you can just control the overall volume, and that's it.
Okay, so bus is the same thing as the DCA?
Yes, essentially.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, then we could just set them up however we want.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So pretty much it kind of groups whatever you want to group together. If you want to have all the vocals on one slide, go up or down, all instruments, or just the drums, or... Oh, the acronym. What does it stand for?
That's a good question.
Huh?
Let's see what Mr. Google says. Digitally controlled amplifier. So it's essentially just a channel to group all your channels and then control the volume collectively. But yeah, it's essentially the same thing as a bus. So
Yeah. Bravo. Also real quick, so he's gonna use just like regular Nord right now. I have my laptop with main stage.
okay,
Is that gonna be very different?
it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be,
It shouldn't be. If you're sending out enough volume, yeah, it should be about the same.
right? So he was asking, should the instrument's volume just be at max on stage?
Honestly, it depends. I typically prefer to have full control, but
So
that's-
that means for the instruments to have full volume.
yeah, pretty close to maxed out. But at church, the way we have it set up, we tell everybody to run at 75 or 80% full volume. So if
Okay.
that way they have a little bit of headroom on their end in case they need to bump it up a little bit. And we have an inexperienced guy behind the board that doesn't realize the piano is going to be doing like a lead line. Then the piano can bump up his volume a little bit, and then he can cut through for that lead line and bring it back down. So right now you can see I'm getting some sort of signal, right? But that's nowhere near enough. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bump up the gain. So like now I'm actually getting close to what I need. So in this situation, I would probably ask for more from the synth. So if you can bump it up from 75 to close to 90, almost 100. Okay. Yeah, so now you see I'm getting exactly what I need, but the gain is almost maxed out. Okay, so right now where I'm at with the synth, I'm getting plenty of gain, which is, I want to see it starting to get into that yellow minimum in that yellow area. This needs to be green. And then, cum? Nu la maxim de aproape. I'm at 63 out of 65, 66. Let's give it a shot. It's close. It's not ideal, but if this was what I was getting on a Sunday, I wouldn't complain. I have 3 more clicks of gain, and that's it. So whatever you did to it, I'm getting a lot more signal, which is good. Because then I can dial down the gain a little bit. And then when he's not playing, I don't get any buzz.
It sounds quieter.
Well, I have the fader down to almost 0. So, like, I have a lot of headroom.
Oh my! Wait, isn't that bad though?
So this is 0. And that's with proper gain structure. So, like
Yeah.
right now, if you look at the board, it's almost like bottomed out, where this volume right here is almost bottomed out. And then if I bump up the volume to 0, that was 0. So, and then from 0, I still have another 10 dB of headroom. So that's essentially where I should be at. I don't know how loud it is out there, because in here it's nowhere near as loud. Out in the house. So then that would mean that we need to bring down the volume on the amps getting sent to the mains. Because even with the wireless mic, I'm getting a little too much signal, so I have to keep it below 0.
So that pad is going through a DI box.
Okay?
Is there something on the DI box you need to switch?
No. Do you have on the DI box? Which one is it?
Some old one.
Is it the radial, the green one?
Let me see if I have an extra one here I could bring.
Well, I mean, whatever it is, it might have a pad button. If there's a pad button, just make sure it's, it might need to be pressed in. Okay, so on the input side, make sure it's flipped to instrument and then flat. So both switches are flipped up. And then it should be good to go. Was it set to amp? Okay, yeah, that's why I needed so much gain. So like, now play. Okay, that's a lot less gain and I'm still getting exactly where I need to be. So,
but what's the volume at?
So the volume I kept the same in-house. It's at like -40, almost bottomed out, and the gain is actually a lot better. I'm not like cranking on the gain. I'm working the gain super hard now. So like in-house, I can bump it up to full volume, right?
That's a 0?
This is a 0.
Play it out.
This is at what, 75%? Okay, that's perfect. Yep. Yeah, because as long as I'm getting in that good gain area, then that's where I need to be. The only thing I noticed right now off the bat is we're gonna have to dial down the amps a little bit in the house because it seems like they're cranked up a little too high and sending too much power to the speakers. So I want to be able to keep you at 0 and not have it too loud. But because then I'm not using the preamps completely. If I have less gain, then essentially I'm not getting the full spectrum of frequencies from the instrument if I'm not using the preamp where it should be. So the number itself doesn't really matter. I need to be hitting above -20. It needs to be averaging like -18, close to 12. So in this, it needs to be hitting, like starting to show the yellow. Which right now it's hitting yellow, which is perfect. That's the sweet spot for the, but yeah. So then from here, what I'm doing, same thing as I did with the vocal. I'm gonna pick my high pass filter, find whatever I don't need, so you can see just how much it affects. I want a little bit of low end from, okay. So this is probably where I would keep it, just because I don't need a ton of low end from the pads. Most of the low end is going to be coming from the bass and the drums, but it's nice to have a little bit of low end from the pads as well when there's nobody else playing. So this would be my EQ, and then I would also put a compressor on the pads. And it was roughly the same. I just opened it up a little bit more. It was cutting a little bit more of that low end than I would want. And then my compressor, roughly the same. I'm gonna have it at like -24 with the ratio a little bit harder than a vocal, so probably like 4:1. The attack all the way down. The release, I'm gonna bring it down a little bit. Then a soft knee, and then out gain, I'm gonna bump it up a little bit. Yeah, so this is probably where I would keep, would be the setting I would use for the pads. And then I have a lot of headroom for it. It's compressing, so if you get like really hard on the keys, it's not gonna be like way too loud. I'm compressing it and then also bringing up the quieter parts. It might be cables or the DI box. Can you check the switch on the output side, what it's flipped to? It should be either ground or lift.
Yeah, it's on ground.
It's on ground?
Is that normal?
Yeah, that should be fine. Try flipping it, see if it fixes the buzzing.
I flipped it.
Is that better?
Yeah,
It's good now?
Sounds better.
Okay, yeah, so that's probably what the issue was with it wasn't grounding properly then.
So basically, all we need to focus on is these three things right there.
You can make a phenomenal mix with just those three.
Bro, I thought it was complicated. We had to touch these things. These are just volume. How do you know if you're sitting at the right volume?
Like fader-wise?
Is that all you would do for pad?
Yeah, so that's basically, that would be the setting I would use for a Sunday service, a Friday night service. I'm pretty happy with the way it sounds, and yeah.
Oh yeah. Are you panning this at all?
So I did not pan it at all, but I probably in a real service I would pan it maybe. So right now it's set to center, but I would probably pan it based on where it's standing. Realistically, maybe 10 or 15, which is almost like not even noticeable, but it does create a little bit of space. So like if I do 10 or 15 to the other side, you'll notice it.
The thing is, when we have these lights, we usually sit on the left side, so we
Yeah.
have to pan it to
Which, you could keep it dead center.
So he was saying like if we pan all the instruments on one side, but you would never do that.
No,
You
I
would try to
never.
divide it up equally, right?
Yeah, so there are certain instruments that I would keep like dead center. Like honestly, if there's a keys player and a pads player, the pads I'm gonna pan one way a little bit, and then the keys is gonna be dead center, just because that's typically how I would run it. I would just split it left and right completely if we're running stereo. But since it's a mono signal, I'm gonna do dead center. So even the pads, the synth right now, I would run it at most like 15 or 10, and that's it.
So for you guys keep using this stereo and mono. Can
Yes.
you please explain this?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So stereo is left and right. You'll see the piano sends out two signals, left and right, so that, like, think of your ears, left and right, right? Everything you hear in nature is stereo because you hear it with both, and there's sound reflecting from everywhere. Mono is just one line going dead center, and it's gonna be a lot more challenging to for your brain to process a mono signal, because nothing in this world is actually mono. And so when you have stereo, it gives you the option to run left and right channels that either, if you can have an effect that will bounce the effect between left and right, or just in general, it'll make it just sound a lot more full. So stereo, if you have the option to run it, I always recommend it, just because it gives you way more clarity, way more fullness to the instrument. Does that make sense?
Okay, you're good?
I'm getting signal now, so yeah. But same situation. Oh, this might be a bad DI.
It needs to be on instrument and flat in DI,
Yeah, match the setting for whatever's on the Nord.
and then okay.
So already with just switching the DI box, I got way more signal, way more clear of a sound. And now I'm actually getting the proper gain structure I need. So that alone helped out a lot. And then I would just, same thing, just down the line, I would go through everything that I need. Yeah, so for this right here, I'm gonna cut a little bit right around 500, just to bring in a little bit more clarity and pull out that like boominess of the piano. And then I can add a little bit of high end to bring some more presence, right? If I want some. See? So if I cut this down, sounds very, very dead. No life to it. I bring this up a little bit. It's got some life into it. And then I'd probably pull the high pass filter back a little bit. And then this EQ I'd be happy with based off of what I hear from in here. And then again, I'm just gonna go into compressor and compress it a little bit. Yeah, so right now I have it compressing pretty minimal. And then if you get on it like really hard, you'll see it's compressing a lot more. Well, he's also sending a lot of volume from the piano itself on stage. So. Yeah, so this is right where it's at. I'd be happy with it on like live Sunday. I would use it exactly as is. Yeah, essentially, I mean, I'm doing this all just based off of like, yeah, the cheat sheet is literally like copy and paste. Like you can do exactly what I did with the cheat sheet. It literally walks you through, like for the synth, the cheat sheet shows for an EQ, it shows 400 to 600 is thickness. Sometimes, and it mentions sometimes it can get muddy in this range. And so that's why I cut out that low end. But like pianos and synths typically don't need a ton. But like I mentioned with the presence for the piano, right around 4,000. So if you look literally right around that 3,000 to 4,000 is where I boosted it for some presence.
By the way, does that cheat sheet only show the EQ? Or is this also compressor?
This one specifically is just an EQ cheat sheet.
Okay.
But there are videos that I can send you guys for compressors. But typically compressors aren't like super complicated. They're pretty standard.
Okay.
You're just gonna watch to make sure it's compressing. Your threshold needs to be right underneath where it's like maxing out, whatever the volume is at. So if it's hitting negative 20, you want the threshold to be negative like 25.
Okay.
So it's cutting already 5 dBs at that point. So we got the acoustic on stage now. And what's your volume at on the guitar? What's your volume at? 75? Do you have any settings that you can adjust on your guitar? The bass and the treble?
Is the pedal on down all the way down?
Okay. Let's start both of them right in the middle. Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. Let's hear it. Okay, so right off the bat, one thing I would do, me as a sound engineer, I would ask the acoustic to bump up a little bit of the bass end on his guitar. Yeah, you can max out one of them and see what it does. Okay, yeah, that's the bass. Okay, let's tone it down just, bring it down just a little bit. Okay, so that's no EQ, no nothing, just the raw guitar. Now I'm gonna go for gain staging, so you can go ahead and play. Okay, so right there is exactly what I want to hear. I'm getting exactly the amount of gain I need. Now I'm gonna go to the EQ. And in-house, it's a little low-end heavy. So I'm gonna cut the... Okay. So right there where I have you right now for the EQ, I cut out some low end, that boomy body part that gets a little too much. And I'm just walking through the cheat sheet right now. Then I boosted up a little bit of the thickness or the body of the guitar. I cut literally exactly where the cheat sheet shows, and this was just by ear. I wasn't even looking at the cheat sheet. But right around 2K is some harshness sometimes with some guitars, so I cut that out a little bit. And then right around 10K, I boosted it, which is that little airy sparkle sound, right? And so now when you play, it's gonna sound full, but also not like overwhelming. It's not gonna cut through, it's not gonna be harsh. So this is typically the way I EQ it, and then a compressor. So right there, with the settings I have right now, I would be totally happy with that acoustic for a Sunday. Not a ton of compressors, not a ton of compression done. The EQ isn't anything crazy. I just rolled over the high pass filter, bumped up some body, cut out some harshness, brought some air into the guitar, and then just made sure that the gain staging was proper. And then with just those minor tweaks, you got a really full sounding acoustic guitar.
Okay, so
Yeah, it sounds really good as is right now. And you were playing over the sound hole or to the left or right? Where were you strumming? Okay, yeah, perfect. That's exactly where I want it. Because there are some people that play a little too far towards the bridge. Yeah, and so when I see people playing too close to the bridge, I have to tell them either to move up or I have to change the EQ on that because it makes it a lot more bright. So, but where you're at is perfect. My out gain? Yeah. So I'm determining my out gain on the compressor just to match the overall. It shows the in and the out.
Okay, you're matching
I'm
them
just,
together.
yeah, I want the average to be roughly the same.
But, how do you even change that? Oh, okay, on this thing. Oh, the releasing. Okay.
EQ is set. Does it change, or do you just how often do you change it usually?
Typically, if it's set decently from the bat, it's minor tweaks. So like at my church, I have everything set, and it's like 90% ready for anybody that walks up.
Okay.
Plug in, and it's basically good to go.
Mm-hmm.
It'll sound good with anything, and then depending on the instrument, like actual instrument, I might need to adjust it a little bit.
What about like I think vocals or what's more?
Okay, so this is, where's your volume at right now? 75? Okay. Let me hear you. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm already getting pretty good gain staging. I don't even really need to touch it. What kind of pedal are you running back there? Is it a stomp or a stomp? Okay, so then that's doing most of the work for you, which is really nice. Because if you have a stomp in the back with good presets, that means the sound guy doesn't need to do like almost anything.
Okay, then I gotta show you our crazy effect on the bass.
I'd love to hear it.
So we have, this is like a little boost. And then there's a fuzz.
Okay.
Throw that in on the Sunday, bro. That's what Eric wants to say. Where'd Eric go?
I love it. So that specific effect, that fuzz, is perfect for when you're in a really big chorus. It helps the bass cut through like big time. Cause like if I don't touch the bass and you're doing all the work with that stomp, when it gets really big, I don't even need to touch your volume because you activate that fuzz and it immediately boosts you and helps you cut through the mix a little more, which is really nice.
Yeah, he has a helix stomper there.
That's a good question. Let's see. There's no bass in the choir. Yeah, I have bass a little bit in the mains.
I don't know if like who's controlling the volume that like the bass is playing at, because like most of the times the bass player puts the bass so loud like on that like bass speaker in the behind you that like our seats on at choir they all like shake.
So what I do typically, we don't run any amps on stage. I don't let my guitarists run amps on stage just because it doesn't give me any control over them.
I was gonna ask, even bass players?
Even bass players. And my brother is a bass player and he hates me for this, but I don't really care. I typically don't allow.
So
What's up? Yeah, I do a DI box, or if they have a helix stomp like right now, that's perfect for what I need.
Because before we used to just go straight in,
Mhm.
like no helix or nothing.
Right.
And then I saw a video, these guys at Bethel, they still have an amp for the basses, but he's the only one.
But the difference with Bethel and Romanian churches is they run really hot audio, so they can get away with amps on stage.
Got
because their mains are way louder than what we keep them at in Romanian churches. And so because of that, the amp does not really add to the mix.
Gotcha.
But in a small room like this, in a Romanian community, typically we're not going to run the audio anywhere near as hot. And because of that, we end up fighting the amps on stage just because they put out too much sound and it's harder to control. So, but yeah, typically I don't really like having amps on stage. If they want to run amps, we run it in a back room, and then we just mic it up. But primarily, amps are more for like tone than it is for actual sound quality and like bringing out the volume. So right now for the bass, because the Helix Stomp is doing so much of the work for me, honestly, the only tweak I would make would probably be to change the high filter into a low pass filter. I'll turn it on and then cut back. So bass typically likes to sit. I typically do kick right around 100. I'll boost it. Bass, I boost underneath 100. So right around like 60-ish. Yeah, I always boost that for the low end. But the Helix is already doing a lot of the work for me. So like this is typically if I didn't have a good pedal working for me, this is probably what my EQ would look like. I would boost right around 1K, and then right around 500, and then about 60, 70. This is what my EQ would look like for a bass without a good pedal, if I have to do all the work myself. But like if you play right now, the bass might be a little too much. Honestly, I'd probably keep it for this too. And then it's just, because this way you get that really low end, that feeling of the low end, and then also you get the clarity from the 1K and then the 500. And then if you roll your tone knob, you're at what, all the way up on the tone knob? Turn it all the way down on the tone knob on the bass itself. Yeah. There's, what kind of bass is it? Does it have two knobs or multiple?
Two big ones and one small one. One is the volume, so if you're only two.
Okay, yeah, so that's the tone knob. Yeah, so typically whenever I have a bass player on stage, I'll tell him to run his tone knob the opposite way, whatever you're at right now, the opposite, as close to the like opposite as possible. So where's the tone knob right now? Is it at 25? So run the tone knob at like 100. Yeah, so that's where I would have a bass player run his tone. Because when the tone knob is at 0, it cuts out a lot of that presence, that like airiness to the bass, and it doesn't cut through anymore. And it's all just like muffled.
You said have the tone knob the opposite of what?
Whatever you had it when it was all the way down. So you have, right now the tone is all the way up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where I would have the tone knob.
Okay. Just always have it there?
Yeah, basically always up at either 100 or close to 100, just because it brings in that like presence and like nice filling sound to the bass. Otherwise, when the tone knob is all the way down, it just sounds muffled.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what I would recommend, what I would recommend for every single band is to not use that bass amp. And I know bass players need to hear themselves. So what I would recommend is have every bass player use in-ears. So that way they can actually hear themselves, but then it doesn't mess with the mix out in the house. The bass isn't way too loud on the stage, whatever the case is. So it just overall cleans up a lot.
Yeah, that's no problem. Everyone pretty much uses all the bases not use them. So yeah, we'll do that then.
Yeah, if as long as all the bass players can move over to in-ears, then you don't have to run that amp on stage, and then it cleans up your mix a lot.
So then let me switch it to a DI box, real quick.
Is the stomp running into
The stomp is going
into the amp?
to the amp right now,
Okay.
or just move that to the DI box.
Which DI box would you be using?
I have some DI box here.
Is it what brand is it?
Livewire, I think that's
Okay.
Guitar Center.
Yeah. That one should be fine. It's just gain.
The DI should be on ground or lift.
Let's play with it and see.
Okay.
What switches does it have on that DI box? Okay, flip it. Okay. So right now it's on what? Ground? It's on lift. Flip it to ground. And this is no effects on the stomp? Okay. Yeah, honestly, this is the way I would run it. Just because on stage you don't have a ton of bass then, and like.
Using these effects, so that's when compressor is going to kick in to help.
Yeah, so that's when I would compress the bass. I would have a compressor on the bass that would look something like this. Yeah, so right now the compressor that I have set is essentially what I would use, just because it tames the bass from getting like way too crazy. But then when you do kick on that effect, it keeps it in check as well as lets you cut through the mix a little more. So yeah, I honestly I would run it with a DI, just because it helps keep volume from on stage, not mudding up the mix super like a ton. Okay, we can do electric guitar if you want. Okay, so one thing I already noticed is this running through the amp, and then you're miking the amp. Oh, okay. Okay, just wanted to double check because I see phantom power's on. And if it was running line in, I don't want phantom power. But because it is mic'd, the mic probably needs phantom power, so that's fine. Okay. Okay, so I'm getting close to what I need in gain. I'm gonna hop over to EQ. this? This is not a Helix, right? It's just like a homemade pedal board. Is it a digital board or like an analog, like multiple pedals? So the only time I ever run amps is if the electric guitarist really likes the tone that the amp has when it breaks up through the tubes. But if I'm gonna have them running amps, the amp is going in a back room that's not in the church, that it's like sound treated, or like I'll put like sound treatment around it and mic it up. Because some people, instead of running like amp simulators on their pedal boards, will run an actual amp. Just because each amp has their own like unique tone. But yeah, I wouldn't keep it in church. I would always run it into, if the pedal board has an amp simulator, I would use that. If not, then, and the electric really likes that amp, you can put it in a different room and put it in a sound treated room where it's not bleeding into the room itself. So one recommendation I have off the bat is every instrumentist can use in-ears if you guys have that capability. If it's what, 4 or 5 instruments, I would run them on in-ears if possible, even if it's like a hardwired in-ear and like you're taking from a monitor, that's fine. Just because then you can eliminate their need to hear themselves, because they can hear themselves in a monitor or in the in-ears. And it cleans up your mix out there way more. Yeah, that's the way I've done it in the past, if we didn't have enough. And the vocalists would just hear themselves through the monitors on stage.
Hey, well, either way, Danny Baran, he uses a Helix straight in. So, I mean, we'll figure that out tomorrow.
What mic are you using? Because I can't hear you.
Mic number 1. There should be one. We can do it. We'll do that. You're not in the house. We'll do that.
Yeah, I got it now.
Oh, he's in the.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So this, I don't know. Like.
Hear me? Okay. So whenever I get to the drum set, I always start from the low end to the high end. And so what I'm gonna have you do, I'm gonna walk you through. We're just gonna go, just follow my lead. So I'm gonna ask you for just kick. And this is the way you would normally play, like in a full beat? Or would you play it harder? Okay. Okay, so now the gain staging is good. I'm gonna mess with the EQ. And so essentially what you can do when you're EQing, a little trick that I learned is you can, it's called a frequency sweep, where you boost really high and just swing through frequencies to see what you like, what you don't. And you can cut out whatever you don't like and boost whatever you do like. So Jason, keep going, please. Okay, so I really like the beefy low end right around 100, but then there's a little body that I don't like around 500, and then I want some attack, which is right around that 5K. And this is, okay, so there's still too much low end for me. I'm gonna turn on the high pass filter. Okay. So that right there is what I would want my kick to sound like. Then I'm gonna compress it. Okay, so that right there, I'm pretty happy with that kick. I'm gonna do snare next. So snare always has a little bit too much low end that you don't want in a mix. So I always bring over the high pass filter to right about 2-ish, 200-ish. Give me like 2 hits on the snare. One more. Okay. So I pulled out that low end that just makes it muddy. And then right around 500-ish hertz, there's like a little ring to a snare that is not really beneficial to a mix. So give me a couple snare hits. Okay. Go one more time. Okay. All right, cool. So I cut out a little bit of the low end of the attack, and I bumped up high end around 4-ish, 4,000 hertz. I bumped it up a little bit just to bring some clarity into that attack. Cut out from that 500 area just to pull out that ring that's not very pleasant. But now I'm just gonna compress it.
What do you mean by attack? The attack area?
The attack, like the punchiness, the part that like the actual like slap of the,
Gotcha.
yeah. Give me a few hits on the snare. Okay. Cool. So that's how I'd run the snare. Let's get some toms. Let's do the rack tom or whichever.
So, the rack tom's not a mic.
Okay, which is the first one that has a mic?
I think this is a rack tom too.
Okay, let's hear that one.
I still play the second one. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine, but since we don't have a mic, I can't really do anything with that one.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's hear the other tom.
Oh, we had a problem with this mic. It's giving like a weird sound. Honestly, you should probably come and check it out.
Okay. Do you want me to check it out right now or?
Let me play, and then I guess if you hear it, then you can come and see.
Okay. Yeah, I hear it. Is the mic clip tightened all the way? Because it sounds like it's just rattling and moving.
I think. Oh, I think it's the tuner. Oh, let me see.
Yep, that was it. Okay. So gain is good. I'm gonna pull back that high pass filter. Honestly, it could be very copy and paste. So I'm gonna copy the other tom and then paste it. Okay, that's a lot better. Now just give me like a full beat to get the overhead. Oh. Okay, so the gain structure is really good. This is not. That should not be. Okay. So this is flat with just the high pass filter. Let's hear that. Okay. So I'd be pretty happy with that. Most of the sound would be affected by the way the drum set is actually tuned themselves. So like if you weren't happy with it, you would probably have to get the drummer to retune the drum set. But with it the way it is as is right now, I think in a mix it would sit pretty nice. So yeah. What's up? Do you guys have a hi-hat mic?
The snare mic kind of picks up the hi-hat. I guess.
Yeah, no, as I mean, right now it sounds pretty okay to me.
Okay. Oh, but I don't think I played the hi-hat once.
Let's hear it. Yeah, sounds good to me. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't do a ton besides the EQ on the overhead, because the overhead EQ was a little questionable. What else is left? I think now, I guess just to maybe put a couple people on stage and then see what it sounds like with all the adjustments we made. What do you think?
Oh man, the in-ear though, because of the gain difference.
It's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it helps it a lot clearer. But just like it's so much
It's
louder.
too
now,
much.
too.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I need to switch it up. I don't have my phone with me.
softer.
So even just as is, all I did was play with faders, didn't really touch anything, and it got a really decent mix off the bat.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it felt for you guys, but
It sounds good.